Welcome back to Killer Fun, where we explore the intersection of crime and entertainment every other week. I'm Christy.
And I'm Jackie.
And today, we are talking about hitman. People contain multitudes.
Yes, they do. They do. You know, my husband made a comment, and I can't help it. Why did they name it Hitman? There are so many, like, Hitman movies. So, like, you say Hitman, and I'm like, which one?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm like, you should have named it. It deserves its own name.
Sure.
Because it's freaking funny.
It was really funny.
It's great.
It was very enjoyable.
It was.
Once I realized that, it was written by the same guy who wrote and directed Bernie.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Totally makes sense. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, yeah, there we go. So, yeah, it was Richard Linklater who wrote and directed this, but he also wrote it with Glenn Powell, who is the star. We're just going to go ahead and talk about the cast real quick.
Yes, like, go right in. Dive right in.
Glenn Powell plays Gary Johnson, and he wanted to write this story, and Richard Linklater had wanted to write it a long time ago, but couldn't figure it out. And it wasn't until the two men got together that they were able to find the story.
That's so great. I love that. I love this. I love that it's inspired by a real person, and then they make up this like alternate ending or this alternate universe for him.
That's right.
I was like,
Yes.
love that. Yeah, it's great.
It was really great. Adria Arjona plays Madison Figueroa Masters. She tries to hire the hitman, and then they kind of have a romantic entanglement. She was in Andor and Good Omens and Father of the Bride, which I'm like, wow, she must have been really young. And then I realized, oh no, it was the 2022 version of
Gotcha.
about the Cuban American family is the Father of the Bride. I was like, oh, so it's not the Steve Martin one. No, it's not.
No, it's not that one.
It's not. Because I was like, she must have been the baby.
Right? But that's like not even possible.
No, even that's not possible. Austin Emilio is Jasper, the dirty cop. His biggest to-date roles have been in The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead.
Yeah.
Retta is Claudette, one of Gary's police chaperones. She was in Parks and Recreation, Good Girls, fun, like comedic-y stuff. It's fun. Sanjay Rayo was Phil, Claudette's partner. He was in The Flight Attendant, which we talked about on the show in the past. And then he was in the absolutely disappointing Apple TV show, Truth Be Told.
Oh.
So that's the one where it was about a podcast. I was so excited about it. And it had Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad and an actress. I can't remember her name. She was in Hidden Figures. She's great. She's great. She's a great actress. Anyway,
I don't know.
So I was so excited about Truth Be Told when I saw it advertised. And I think I watched 3 episodes and it was truly awful.
That's sad.
And they made a second season of it.
Am I supposed to know about that?
I don't know. I think I had thought about suggesting it to cover on the show, and it was so truly awful.
Oh, that's so sad.
It was really
sad.
sad.
Apple TV can be like that, though.
Well, and that's the thing. They're kind of, it's really good, or it's really not good. There's very little, like, mediocre stuff.
Really? It's true. It's true.
Yeah. All right, shall I recap it?
Recap.
Sometimes you choose a career, say college professor, and sometimes a side gig that's just to make ends meet turns into something really special. Gary Johnson is most comfortable explaining and talking about esoteric ideas in and out of a college classroom, and he has some interest in electronics that allows a supplemental stream of income with some work for the New Orleans Police Department. Gary's psychology and philosophy training bleed into his part-time gig when the primary undercover detective is put on administrative leave just as he's supposed to meet with a quote-unquote client. Shockingly, Gary is well equipped to pretend to be a hitman for hire and takes to it with vigor and aptitude that shocks his police coworkers. They have come to know Gary to be dull. His alter egos are anything but. Gary is fantastic at his pretend side hustle as a hitman, right up until he finds himself a bit too sympathetic and attracted to a lovely young woman in an abusive relationship.
Perfect.
There we go. I have thoughts.
Okay. Hit me with your thoughts because I have some thoughts.
Okay,
too.
good. Yes. So when he's first tapped Gary to pose as the hitman, he has the right idea to reschedule. This is how I could tell kind of early, other than the disclaimer at the beginning that says it's a somewhat true story, that this is only true-ish.
Yeah.
Because I don't really think that they'd send in an untrained, unpracticed, dressed in jorts dude into a potentially dangerous situation that was just as likely to get the police department sued as it was to end an arrest.
Yes, exactly.
There we go. I laughed very hard at him saying to himself, think hitman thoughts.
Think hitman thoughts. All I could think was Bruce Willis and Friends. I'm a neat guy. Think hitman thoughts.
$5,000 to kill somebody seems horrifyingly affordable.
I took a sip of coffee and wow, almost saw it again. Okay. That's hilarious. Yes. I was thinking really just too low. You full on went with affordable.
Horrifyingly affordable.
It's so true.
That was my favorite way to describe it. I was like, $5,000. Is there anybody I want to knock off? No, there's not.
No, that's a too good to be true situation, which is why it's a detective and not a real hitman.
Exactly. So Gary gets his first client, Craig, to verbally confess to trying to hire a hitman and says, the next time you see me, you'll have a brand new life.
Yes.
And all I could hear in my head was Ross from Friends saying, yes, in prison.
The Friends references today.
I mean,
it's not going to end.
No.
Let's just,
not.
Disclaimer. Lots of Friend references today.
Gary says his interest in human behavior makes him well qualified to pretend to be a hitman. Mm-hmm. Jackie, are you ready to become a fake gunman for hire?
Put me in, coach. All right? Put me in.
I know. I was like,
ego.
Jackie would be so good at this. So Jasper, the cop who got suspended, was mad to be told to lay low for a while upon his return, and he nastily asks if he should clean toilets. And this just happens to be a pet peeve of mine because I hate this kind of elitism.
Yes.
Because as if custodial work isn't meaningful or valuable.
Right.
I'm like, screw you. You should be cleaning out the rat traps.
I mean,
what is the most detestable thing that you would hate to do? Mm-hmm. And that's what you should be doing because cleaning toilets is too good for you because that is actually meaningful work.
Yep. It's the minute he can't be the big boss.
No.
Because big bosses do everything.
Yeah.
You just don't see them.
Right.
But if something happens and they're there, they're going to take care of it.
That's right.
And yeah.
Yeah, the toilet backs up, they're going to be there with a plunger.
Yeah,
and not tell anybody about it.
Right? And so you think that they never do that stuff. But the real big bosses, the ones who are actually good at their job.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
After Gary meets Madison the first time, he takes a trolley. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, it's not great. It's just average. But I found myself really envious of any kind of reliable public transportation because I've never had it anywhere I've lived because I live in the burbs.
Yep. And San Antonio doesn't have. The city does not have.
I mean, they've got the buses, but even then they're not super reliable. They try really hard.
They try.
And my final thought.
Okay.
So I don't really quite understand what changes in Glenn Powell when he acts, but he is able to go from dorky to suave in a few steps.
Yep.
Like literally, like he could take 3 or 4 steps and he goes from the dorky guy who's talking about the birds
Yep.
to sexy, suave Ron, the contract killer. And I don't know how he does it. It's incredible. It's a wonder.
It's amazing. It's an injection of confidence that he has, like that he doesn't have when he's just Gary. Like when he's Ron, he has like a confidence. And the glow up is wow.
Yeah. And so fast.
I mean, instant.
I mean,
I wasn't
he's
prepared.
thinking hitman thoughts.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared for that.
No, me either. And I was like,
Whoa.
oh, wow. He went from like just a dude to really hot.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a surprise.
Yes. So much of the movie was shot on location in New Orleans.
It seemed like that, right?
It was, that's kind of a rarity in Hollywood that the primary city where things are happening is also the shooting location. So the intersections that we see, they're really, really fun ones. Like the intersection of law and desire and pleasure and piety.
Yeah.
Those are real intersections in New Orleans, which is super fun. Gary Johnson's college scenes were shot at the University of New Orleans.
That's cool.
That's super fun. When Madison and quote unquote Ron end up with having kind of their first date, it's because Madison is hosting a rescue puppies event at a park. And that is a famous park in New Orleans called City Park. So it was really cool. If you're from New Orleans, I bet this was very fun to see all of these actual real places.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Speaking of Madison, she does not get arrested because Gary feels for her.
Yes.
Because she's in an abusive relationship. So
Yes.
if you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, there's help.
Yes, not hitmans.
No. not a hitman. That's the wrong way to go. For a lot of reasons that we'll get into in just a minute.
For so many reasons. Yes.
But the National Domestic Violence Hotline is there for you. You can call them on the phone, 1-800-799-7233, 1-800-799-SAFE. You can go onto their website if that's a safe thing for you to be able to do, thehotline.org. I appreciate that it's easy to remember and it's not descriptive. But the URL as to what it is. You can live chat with somebody 24 hours a day, or you can text. You send START, S-T-A-R-T, to 88788. And you can get help. They'll connect you to resources in your area within the U.S., and they'll help you get taken care of.
Good.
Yeah.
Yes. Choose that route.
Yeah, it's much better.
So here's how it works. Christy wrecks her search history. Hey, an essay. We promise it's nothing more nefarious than a podcast. To find out what's true, some of the psychological motivations behind the characters' actions, and real-life applications that relate to our topic. I have no idea what Christy decided to look up. Could be the same thing that captured my curiosity or something I never thought of.
Is it true?
No. I mean, okay, they thankfully have this little disclaimer. It is really cool. They took the life of a real person.
Yes.
Who did this kind of work.
Yes.
And sort of made up this story in this man's universe. And I love it.
I love it too. It's super fun. And I think you'll be shocked at how much of it actually is like based in some sort of truth. So this is actually based on an article by the
Texas Monthly.
The incomparable Skip Hollandsworth wrote an article called Hitman. They used so much from this article that he is literally listed as one of the writers.
Yeah.
Like the screenplay was by Powell and Linkletter, but they used so much from this Texas Monthly article that it is like gets a writing credit.
I mean, Bernie was similar. It was also a Texas Monthly article. That's where the story, where Linklater kind of found it and went forward from there. it is the same writer.
Yes.
So it's the same Skip Hollandsworth.
Yes. Yes. He wrote both of those articles and all of the very most iconic Texas Monthly articles that are about crime
Yeah.
have been by Skip Hollandsworth.
And he was actually credited as a screenplay writer
Okay.
on Bernie.
Okay. Yes. So the articles in Texas Monthly.
Yeah.
So that tells you right off the bat that did not take place in New Orleans.
Yeah, I wondered if it was, because it could still, I mean, or so close to.
Yeah.
I wondered if it was or if they changed the locale.
So the actual location of Gary Johnson was Houston.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that was kind of what made it. But Hal had grown up in New Orleans. Linkletter has connections to New Orleans.
Gotcha.
Gary was a man,
Okay.
and he did undercover work. And he did live alone with his 2 cats. He did feed his goldfish. He did tend his garden. He did, all of these small, things that tell you something about his character. Like right there at the beginning, all of that is based in some truth.
That's great.
About who Gary Johnson was. He passed away in 2022.
Oh.
So he did not get the opportunity to see this finished.
It's sad.
But I think it's all right. Yeah. Interestingly, he was a big fan of Gandhi and kept a book of Gandhi quotes on his coffee table. And one of his favorites was, "Nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. It is mightier than the mightiest weapon of destruction devised by the ingenuity of man."
Nice.
Which I'm like, oh, that's interesting for a man who does sting operations on.
It's almost like he has to remind himself. It's almost like a grounding technique to remind himself not to get into that world.
Right.
You know, it's interesting. Okay, did you ever watch those videos of the woman who explains things on the farm with her animals and her livestock, and she'll do informational kind of things?
Okay.
Except that the
donkey.
Is it a donkey or is it
a llama?
A llama. The llama is all destructive and she's yelling at, "Don't choose violence."
Yes.
Those were good.
Those were good. They were really funny. I wish I remembered what her name was.
Oh my gosh. It would take 2 seconds. Don't choose violence. Oh, Emmanuel.
Oh, yes.
Emmanuel woke up and chose violence today. It's an emu.
An emu. Okay.
Yes.
So not a donkey or a llama. It was a giant bird. Okay.
The shape, I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. Whatever.
Yes.
I just it's been years since I saw it. I'll find a good video of compilations of Emmanuel choosing violence and share it on our social media. Anyway, so Gary.
Yeah. It was not an emu.
So because this was 2001 when this article was written for Texas Monthly, he did not have a second cell phone with where he got phone calls.
What?
So Gary had his own cell phone right in the movie, and then he had a second cell phone where he would get the calls from the would-be hitman people.
Right.
He didn't have a second cell phone. He didn't have a cell phone at all, as far as we know, at that time, because it was 2001. A lot of people didn't have that. So instead, he had a black telephone in his bedroom.
That was the line.
That was the line. So the police would call him and
great.
give him some information. And that was also the line that the would-be clients would get, and he would answer it.
That's hysterical.
I was like, oh, it's like the red phone to the,
Yes.
to the Oval Office or whatever.
Or the night watcher.
Ooh.
That was a good, the night agent.
The night agent.
That was a good one.
Okay.
He sits and monitors the red telephone.
His clients did know him by fake names like Mike Caine and Jody Eagle and Chris Buck. Chris Buck is the one that sounds the most made up to me. I don't know why.
Oh, that's funny.
In 2001, he'd been doing this for about 10 years.
Okay.
And about 60 Houston area residents had contacted him for services, which seems like a lot.
It does.
But they wanted him to shoot, stab, chop, poison, or suffocate their enemies, their romantic rivals, or their former loved ones.
Wow.
He'd been hired by scorned lovers, broke businessmen, and teenagers who were mad at their mothers or fathers. We
saw that.
All of those things. And, no matter what they asked him to do, he was just like, yeah, I can handle it.
Wow.
Yeah. He was, however, not pulled into this kind of accidentally. There was no cop that was dirty that had been on probation or administrative leave that he had to take over for. He was a staff investigator for the Harris County District Attorney.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And they just kind of decided that he should do this one day. They were like, hey, we're going to have you do this because we think you'd be good at it. And it turns out Skip Hollandsworth called him the Laurence Olivier of the field.
That's great.
Because he was literally better at it than anybody else.
Man, I wish we had video of that.
I mean, right? I wonder if there's... It didn't even occur to me to look and see if there's audio recordings.
Or at least audio.
Yeah. Well, because he had audio recordings of everything.
Right. But there were still security cameras,
right.
So I'm sure that
there's got to be
video.
Yeah.
But
let's see. There was a woman who wanted her husband killed, and she took off $200,000 of jewelry. She was first of all, she was wearing $200,000 worth of jewelry, including a very large wedding ring, because her husband that she wanted murdered was an heir to a oil thing. Yeah.
She was
and she told him, do what you need to do.
Wow.
Yeah. Her attorney was planning to argue that she was unlawfully enticed. She ended up being found guilty, but only served probation.
Oh. Okay.
It was a whole thing. But
I mean, that is the legal system, right? It's so parsed to this particular crime.
Right.
What did you actually do? Because we don't punish people for thoughts.
Right.
And for,
Yeah. And I mean, we saw some of that where they were trying to say, this was a spur of the moment thing, that he tried to hire a hitman. The attorneys had tried to say of Gary that he had twisted the conversations to make them look like they were saying something that they weren't really, or that he was entrapping them, or that he was intimidating his clients. Even a Houston area defense attorney, Dan Cogdell, said you agree to meet him out of some morbid curiosity, but once you're there, you realize this is not what you want to do. But you start thinking that if you back out of the meeting, the stone cold killer might take you out because now you know who he is. That defense did not work.
It didn't work?
No, because Gary said things like, this is your last chance to get out. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, when I leave here, your little friend will be dead. I don't want to hear you complaining later that you never meant to go this far. Are you sure this is what you want?
Yeah. Provided the safety to say, no harm, no foul.
Yeah, you know what? I've changed my mind.
Okay, no harm, no foul.
Right.
Right? Because... so he gave him that option.
Yes, and he was very good at that.
I mean, I hate to say it, but that defense, though,
I mean,
whether they say it or not, you realize you're out of your depth.
Right.
You realize you're talking to somebody who does lie for a living anyways as a hitman. So why would he be truthful about this safe, no harm, no foul exit?
Right.
And you start to psych yourself out oh my God.
I can see that.
I could see that.
Yeah.
Depending on the case, I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting.
But he did teach community college. So at this time, when the article is written, on Mondays, he taught human sexuality. Okay. And on Tuesdays, he taught general psychology.
Okay. I was about to say, he was a psych professor. Okay.
He literally was.
That's great.
He had dreams of being a full professor, that being his main full-time only gig. And that he actually moved to Houston to try and go to the University of Houston, but got rejected from the doctoral program in psychology there. And that's when he started working as an investigator for the district attorney. And it was in about 1991 when they told him, you're going to do this. And some of the things that he was faced with. So they separated this part out into several different people, but it was one guy who said, I'm going to be offshore. I want you to kill them during this window so that I have this airtight alibi. And it was that same guy who was trying to have his wife killed. I think it was somebody else in the movie. Like, it wasn't his wife, but it was somebody else that he was trying to have killed.
I can't remember now.
I can't remember either.
I can see his face.
Yeah. Well, I can see that guy. This is Craig, the first guy that he's talking to. He wanted it to, some other people, it was the same guy. He wanted it to look like a suicide.
Okay.
He wanted to be able to sue the doctors for malpractice. Those things got all pulled apart into different characters, but they were all the real things that happened. Somebody really did offer him a luxury motorboat as payment. There was a kid who gave him 7 Atari games, $3 bills, and $2.30 in nickels. But he didn't want his mom killed. He wanted a male classmate killed because they both liked the same girl.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That escalated. Mm-hmm. Wow.
Yeah. But that looks like good pie. And all pie is good pie really was like the way how they identified one another.
Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. That's cool.
Yeah. I thought that was really fun. Many people really did end up with probation or minor prison sentences. And for the exact reason that they show in the movie, that they would arrive to their courtroom with their victims who testify that they've forgiven them.
I don't know that I could do that.
And, I don't know that I could either. I'd be like, oh no, this is divorce time.
I mean, unless we both realize both tried, maybe then that bonds you together.
I don't know. If it gets that bad, that's a pretty hard bar to climb over.
It's really hard. Yes.
This was interesting. He did find that the economy affected how many people were looking for hitmen. Oh. That in the late 90s, things got kind of quiet for Gary because the economy was really good. And then it started to take a little south turn in the early 2000s. Yeah. And more people, they were more desperate. So they were looking for alternative routes out of their problems.
It makes sense.
Yeah. And one time, Gary did indeed meet a woman.
Ooh.
She'd been to a Starbucks and she had talked repeatedly to this particular barista at the Starbucks about how abusive her boyfriend was and how afraid of him she was and how she thought her only way out would be if he died. And so, of course, the informants for these cases, they're all people who get asked if they know a hitman, that these people, and they're like, I'm going to call the police because this person seems serious. Yeah. And that's how they ended up getting connected with Gary Johnson, was because these people are like, these people are crazy and they're really going to get somebody killed. Yeah. So I'm going to call the police, and that's how they get
a good lead.
Yeah, a good lead. So Gary did a little research into this because he'd heard this story and did find that she had been involved many times with police and her boyfriend, that they'd been called out, that she was afraid to leave because if she left, she was afraid of what he would do when he caught her. And that was the only time that he did refer her to social services, got it all set up for her prior to their meeting. Oh. They did not end up dating.
Oh, well.
But it really did happen that way.
But that's nice. That they did that and then basically rescued her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's sweet.
Yeah. Is a bayou burial a thing? Gary said he was going to do a bayou burial.
I mean, it feels like a Dexter thing to me.
It does.
But I mean, yeah.
I couldn't find that it was a common term or a common sort of thing for people to be talking about.
It sounds like a piffy way of saying something that does happen.
Yeah, probably.
Right? Probably his piffy way of saying.
Yeah, we're going to drop people in the swamp.
Yeah. It didn't feel like a term. It felt like him having suave language.
Probably.
about something that really does happen.
Right. Probably. Nobody calls it a bayou burial.
Well, I wouldn't if I were anybody.
No, right. But the Bayou Gauche, it really is a place in Louisiana.
Yeah. Well, and there's a few like bayou kind of crime, like for instance, Everglades, right? I know we call it the Everglades. It's still a swamp.
Yeah.
You know, it's all, and then lots of crime going on in the Everglades.
That's right.
That was a good show.
How about the place where Gary, as Ron, met Madison, the Please You Restaurant Cafe? Is that real?
That looks real.
Okay, it is real, and it has been there for 44 years. Owned by Greek entrepreneurs Mr. Nick and Miss Helen, and they do have pie on the menu.
Nice.
How about the Ted's Fro Stop?
That felt a little done up because it looked like a tasty freeze.
Okay, it did look like a tasty freeze, but it is an actual real place.
Okay.
It opened in 1955. Ted Sternberg, who was local to New Orleans, came back from the Korean War and went ahead and opened his Fro Stop.
That's great.
And named it after himself. But they were there in the evening, right?
Yeah.
That wouldn't have been a time that they could have
Oh, so
been
they
there.
close early.
They close at 5 p.m. Monday through Friday
Okay.
and 3 p.m. on weekends.
Wow.
So they
You know
wouldn't.
you're popular when you can do that.
That this is true. Well, and that's probably why it was evening time in the film, because they had already closed.
Yeah, it was
and they were
easy.
able to use it as a location.
Yeah. It's like you're not getting into Cafe Du Monde.
Yeah.
Right? Like, not happening.
All right. So Gary said hitmen aren't real. Is that true?
I think hitmen are real.
Okay.
I think there are hitmen.
Okay.
I don't know that it's suave or anything. I think it's nasty, like, you know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, a couple articles from the New York Times. Do real hitmen exist?
Yeah.
Yes, but not in the way Hollywood would have you think of them. So certainly like enforcers for gangs and organized
Right.
crime and things
Yes.
like that happen. But you can't just Google how do you find a hitman. Even on
Well,
the
not
dark
Google.
Well, even on the dark web, there's murder for hire sites, Slayers, Hitmen, and Azerbaijani Eagles. Basically all of them, the FBI has looked at them, by the way.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm sure that it's all monitored.
And they're all scams.
Yeah.
All of them.
They're all meant to.
Yes. A professor from the John Jay College of Criminal Justice, Dennis Kenny, said that the idea of like a slick, skilled hitman is pretty much a myth.
Yeah.
And that a contract killer would usually be nothing more than a thug who offers or agrees to a one-time payday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense. That feels far more correct.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
So are there notable contract killers?
Well, I'm sure that that's classified.
Well, there's one we know of. Woody Harrelson's dad.
That's true too. And that would be more organized crime related.
Yeah.
And I think the only
Ish.
slick ones are classified.
Yeah, you would think they're maybe good enough at their job not to get caught. We
Well,
don't realize
like-
these people are being murdered.
Well, I'm literally like top secret.
Yeah,
Yeah,
probably.
like governments. Governments do have hitmen. Maybe not ours. Okay.
Jackie says to make the NSA not.
Yes, go away. But I mean, we know this because we watched recent assassination attempts on people in, you know, mostly Russian attempts on people.
Sure.
And so we know that exists. So we know that exists over there, and that is a thing. But like, I think like people like Woody Harrelson's dad are like a unicorn.
I mean, but he only did it twice, and he got caught both times.
I mean, that's funny.
He, in 1973, killed a grain dealer in Texas for $2,500.
Wow.
He went to prison and only served 5 years because of good behavior. And then in 1982, he killed a federal district judge and got $250,000 for that.
Inflation.
But again, he got caught.
Yeah. So he wasn't good at it.
No.
But, you know.
The FBI only works between 70 and 90 murder for hire cases every year.
Yeah.
That's it.
Pretty rare.
Nationwide.
Yeah, like
300 and some million people in the United States. Less than 100 a year is that they're working. And then there was another article also from the New York Times earlier this year than the one I was just referring to, where they're talking about that murder for hire plots really difficult to arrange in the first place and even harder to get away with. And John Bearer, who was a former CIA officer, wrote a book called The Perfect Kill, 21 Laws for Assassins. He says, I know a lot of bad guys. I could not find you a hitman, and I know a lot of murderers. I was like,
it's a bad deal.
Yeah, that's right. When you have a civilian who's doing this, somebody who just claims to be a hitman, they're pretty inept. They're sloppy, like Woody Harrelson's dad. The inexperienced killers, many of whom are stymied by basic logistics, like keeping quiet about their plans. So there are things that, the mob is the one that's probably the most well known. And there's also sicarios who work for drug cartels who are very prolific, but also like those are the ones that are not getting caught maybe, but they're working for a specific organization. The FBI did catch a few people from the satirical website rentahitman.com.
No.
Where people actually thought that they could hire a hitman that way. And there was even a young man who was a Tennessee Air National Guardsman who applied at rentahitman.com with his resume and everything. I'm like,
wow.
Let's be smarter.
I mean, bless your heart.
Yeah. So some of the would-be clients try to use the defense of entrapment against Gary's evidence. So it made me wonder what's the difference between entrapment and a sting.
I know. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Yes, let's do this.
So entrapment is when law enforcement gets involved and they convince someone to commit a crime they wouldn't have done otherwise. You'll see this often in drug cases, prostitution, underage sex crimes, white-collar crimes, those sorts of things. But a sting operation is finding people who are predisposed to committing the crime and giving them the opportunity for it to take place. So even if the actual crime itself is not carried out, like the hitman. An arrest can still be made if they demonstrate that they have a voluntary interest in this particular criminal activity. So in Texas, to utilize the defense of entrapment, you would need to establish that you were not inclined or willing to commit a crime and that the officer used inappropriate tactics to get you to do it, like exploitation, or they're harassing you, or they continually contact you, or they make fraudulent promises about they're going to give you money if you do this, or things like that.
Right.
It's not, entrapment isn't just being offered the opportunity to engage in illegal activity. That's not entrapment. You actually have to have like a willingness to do it. So for example, like if you were to go into a bar and get drunk, and you decide you wanted some cocaine. You happen to tell the bartender, hey, I want to score some cocaine. Where can I do it? And he sends you out to an alleyway and tells you to talk to such and such a guy, and that guy turns out to be an undercover police officer. That's not entrapment.
No.
If the police officer came into the bar and got you drunk,
right, and
then offered to sell you cocaine and tried to arrest you, that would be entrapment,
right,
because you're no longer in the position of being able to say no effectively.
Right. It's a fine line, and I can see why it's subjective in some ways and why you have to make an argument about it. And it really comes down to like intent.
Yes, for sure. all of the sources that we use to inform our discussion here on Killer Fun Podcast can be found on our social media. Join us on Facebook at Killer Fun Podcast, exploring the intersection of crime and entertainment. You can find us on Twitter at Killer Fun Pod, or you can send us an email at killerfunpodcast@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share a link to whatever information you're looking for. We love to hear from you. You might learn a little something too. Psychology break.
Let's do it.
All right. So Gary's ex-wife and best friend, Alicia, chatted with him about the possibility that people can change their personality with lots of effort. Psychology Today has a whole article about personality change, and that she listed a number of characteristics.
Wrongly.
Oh, really?
That was my thought. That was the only real thought I had the entire time. And I noticed some things. When she freaking messed up the big five, I was like, wait.
Okay.
What did she just say? Now, it's not that she didn't say something that might be kind of true as a personality trait. Like emotional stability was the one she kind of messed up there.
Okay.
But she also referred to the big five. Like, the big five. Like, okay, well, the E in big five is not emotional stability. It's extroversion.
Yes. Okay. So that's listed here.
Yeah. So just to point that out. But it's not that on other scales, emotional stability, mood stability, all right, would be maybe something that is measured. But it's not the big five, y'all. Okay.
Yeah. They don't have all five listed here.
It's OCEAN. That's the acronym for the big five.
Tell us what they are.
So the big five is one measure of personality, and it's one. So when we think about personality, we think of traits, and they're a spectrum, right? So you can take a measure, like an assessment that would measure these traits, and so you have OCEAN. So it's openness, and then it's conscientiousness, then it's extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay. So personality trait measures tend to be pretty stable in adulthood, but there is indication from research that there's room for personal evolution.
Yes.
Which, I mean, I think we know this, but it used to be believed that we were pretty set in our ways, and it's a lot more malleable than they once thought.
It was like a trend for a long time in psychology, especially when it moved into a more clinical realm.
Okay.
It was starting to think more, there was a popularity about a fixed personality or
that
fixed
makes the
amount
research
of traits.
easier, doesn't it?
It does. And so, but a lot of people still at the time felt like there was a malleability, which is why really when you look at these, they're traits on a spectrum, even then.
Right.
Okay. Where do you land on this trait? It's not, are you extroverted or are you introverted? Right? It's not a Cosmo quiz. Right. It's a measurement of which way you sort of lean.
And you can shift on that continuum a little bit.
People tend to shift on that continuum in a predictable manner throughout life. It's pretty stable compared to other things.
Okay.
Compared to other things. It can be fairly stable. However, a lot of the things that are personality driven also have skill sets.
Okay.
And so what a person might be able to do is they might be able to add the skill set. So if you follow more of a growth mindset sort of ideal, which I do, that's my bias. Let's lay it out. Like I like a growth mindset, but I'm very aware that certain things are pretty stable. Like for instance, attachment style is shown to be fairly stable. But thankfully, a lot of these have skills on the back end. So my personality may never be a certain way, like on a predictable level, but I can add skills. So if I score low, or rather, if I score high on neuroticism, like say I have like a little higher, I'm drama queen, right? Like I can learn some skills that may make my relationships and my life far more successful and have better outcomes for myself. But when left to my own devices, I may still be a little neurotic. Okay. Right? And the same thing goes for the other. Openness to change. Like I might be very like set in my ways, but I can learn to be open by using some coping skills, changing my mindset, doing things like that. So I can actually get the benefit of behaving in an open way, even if my natural tendency is to be like, no, don't change.
Okay.
right?
That's great.
So when we say personality, we're kind of talking about like, what's your norm? Like,
Okay.
where are you at normally before you employ all the things you've learned?
Okay.
Right? But you
actually have to want to apply those things.
You have to, and that's where conscientious comes in.
Just wanting to be different is not the same as working to be different.
Which is why conscientiousness of the big five is the most stable.
Okay.
Because it's the one that determines if you're going to work on anything else.
Oh, okay.
So conscientiousness is hard.
Okay.
Hard to learn, which is why relationships, when we're like, people don't change, that's the trait we're talking about.
Is conscientiousness.
Yeah, because that's the one that kind of goes into, are they going to be self-reflective enough? Are they going to want to add those skill sets? So there's a certain amount of conscientiousness that is required for grit and for a lot of these kind of things that are that show people can change over time. If you're low on conscientiousness, the chances of you actually changing a lot of these others probably pretty low. But if you're high in conscientiousness, you probably have a better chance of changing your actual natural personality by adding skill sets and then sort of adjusting to that as a mindset.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Okay. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. It was interesting. They talked about how genetics, can really really, I mean, if you have friends who you're like, I don't understand how their kids came out so different than their parents, for the good or the bad, either way, or like, how did these parents raise that kid?
Yeah, like they're just wildly different.
They're just like they're so different, or they have such different values. You can't underestimate the role of genetics in personality. But when you have like big life changes, like getting married or a job or different things like that, these big things that can happen, going to college, whatever, life and death, births, deaths, these kinds of things can move you. They can move the needle a lot easier than just like normal everyday life. And that, therapy can also produce change, but it's harder.
Therapy.
It's more work.
Therapy.
So yeah,
it's
again,
yeah. That's a whole nother can of worms. And it's not like I'm not saying go to therapy. I'm just saying our expectations need to be readjusted and managed a bit.
Sure. Yeah. What's possible.
Like, what that looks like.
Right. And they don't know how sustained those changes can be.
Right.
When things kind of settle into a routine, you may or may not continue to have some of those adjusted traits.
Yeah.
So you have to you do really have to work at it. And then, mental health can affect your personality. If you're using substances, they can do things. Borderline personality disorder can affect your ability to function in the world, anxiety. It makes you have an
unstable neuroticism, high on neuroticism.
Yeah, there you go.
Neuroticism, people tend to, because we say the word neurotic, and it's not wholly different, right? But neuroticism, especially when we're talking about borderline personality or any of the histrionic, any of these, the neuroticism is basically, think unpredictable.
Okay.
Right? Unpredictable. And that means it's really hard to nail down who you really are. So if you're high on neuroticism, but you don't have a disorder, then, like I said, I kind of made the joke about drama queen, right? You can learn some skills but you might in your head still be kind of like a little bit of a drama queen or whatever. But if you have a diagnosis, that's why personality disorders are the hardest.
Okay.
Because you have to have a high level of conscientiousness in order to have the self-reflection to try to change these things, at least on a behavioral side, all while dealing with the lies that your own mind is telling you.
Oh, okay.
So I think about my mom a lot because she had personality disorder that was borderline. And so I learned I manipulated her.
Okay.
A lot. I had to. Because I had to initiate certain conversations in a way that would bypass the disorder.
Oh, okay.
And then I could get to my real mom.
Okay.
The real person.
Right.
Right? So, for example, if I was at college and I was planning to come home for a weekend and then somebody asked me to go do something really fun, borderline personality disorder dictates I can't just call mom and say, hey, this is a fun thing going home. I'm going to stay here, and then I'm not going home this weekend, but I will come home next weekend. She wouldn't be like, oh, okay,
Yeah,
well,
go have fun.
We'll
Yeah,
miss
no,
you.
she'd be like, no, you said you were coming home. Come
you
home.
don't love me.
Oh,
Personality disorders like this are like, it's just a nightmare. If I were to call her and say, hey, my friend so-and-so invited me to a thing, her response would have been like, okay, well, if that's what you need to do, I just, I always knew you didn't love me.
Oh, geez.
And it would, and the attacks and it would go downhill fast, right? So this is what I would do. Hey, Mom, I really need your advice. Oh, on what? Well, so-and-so invited me to this thing this weekend, and they feel like it's really important, but I'm coming home. So what should I tell them? Like, how do I let them down easy? Like, what should I do to make it up to them? I'm like, I'm really lost. That bypasses it. No more threat, right?
Yeah.
She has no threat to her personality or her feelings. It bypasses it. Now my real mom can come out. Oh my God, just go.
Go. I'll see you the weekend after.
We're here. Go have fun with your friend. That's like a one-time thing. We'll see you next weekend. Tell her it's going to be great. Blah, 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 blah. That's my real mom.
Aww.
So personality disorder is hard because you have to separate. That's not really their personality. That's the disorder. Then they have this other personality that's like really sweet and kind and excited.
Aw.
Yeah.
Wow, that's hard. Yeah. That's rough for somebody in their late teens or early 20s to figure out.
But once I figured it out, I had a much better relationship with her. Because personality change is hard.
Yeah.
And when you have a disorder, it's like, so.
Well, another thing that Alicia brought up when she was talking to Gary was the as if principle.
Oh, yeah.
So this is outlined in a 2014 book by Richard Wiseman. And again, this tells us that the story in the movie is not taking place at exactly the time that
the
actual events were taking place, because
Right.
this book wasn't out.
No.
Wouldn't be out for more than a decade.
Yeah. No, they modernized it. They put it in our time frame.
Absolutely. Well, he had a cell phone, so.
Yeah.
The as if principle wasn't new at that time. So
fake it till you make it.
Right. Yes, exactly. Well, and it has its root in a 19th century work by a philosopher named William James, but it has a lot of modern applications.
Oh,
and that's
for sure.
what he was talking about, that the stories we tell ourselves, whether it's physical or behavior, really can motivate us in fruitful ways.
Yeah.
And it is very much a fake it till you make it, or I don't want to be the person who does XYZ thing, so I'm just not going to be that person.
Yeah, I'm going to be this person over here.
I'm going to not do those things, or I am going to do those things. And a lot of real like actual impetus to change, and you're actually able to do it, which is really cool. And so like they had a lot of success with it. Oxford did a study led by David Clark, and he said people with anxiety and panic attacks, they would encourage them to look at their body's reaction and try to interpret it in a different way.
Yeah.
So if they were about to take a test and they were so nervous they thought they couldn't do it, exam nerves help focus attention.
Yeah.
Or a little adrenaline makes for a better interview.
Always.
Like if you like figure out how to tell yourself what is happening in my body isn't necessarily a bad thing, then you can handle it better. And I was like, oh, that's really cool.
I mean, this is why behaviorism took over, because does it really matter if our core natural personality or natural tendencies or disorders are what they are, if we can still have positive outcomes and behave in a way that is more beneficial? Discussion. But behavioralism is so good with this, and it's like, so a lot of people misunderstand what panic attack is.
Okay.
A lot of people think panic attack is a panic over the thing, like that something. Now, there may be a trigger, but it's like you said, it's the sensations in the body that are responding to the trigger, and it's the fear of the sensations that's the panic attack.
Okay.
The panic attack is literally, panic disorder is characterized by the fear and the negative assessment of the bodily reactions to outside triggers. Right. So panic attack is not like, oh my God, I saw the numbers. That's so expensive. I don't know that I can do this or blah, blah, blah. The panic attack is, ooh, I saw the numbers. I got a little rush there. Like, wow, that was a sticker shock. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm dying because I had a rush of adrenaline.
Right.
Right. And then once you have that thought, all the rest of your body follows suit because it's like every other nerve goes, what? What? We're dying?
Yeah.
Oh no. Nerves are neurotic. Okay. So like, all right.
It's almost like that's where the word neurotic came from.
I mean, almost, right? I've got, yes, like the nerves, the case of the nerves, like there's so many terms, like, so like, yeah, if you can reframe it as data, like if you see a performer on the side of the stage, they're jumping and they're like doing the thing, it's because that's how they assess it. If you're not nervous, oh crap. I don't have enough to like go out and do the thing, right? So it's kind of, yeah. So I love it. I love that work. I think it's really important work because, you know, I wish that more people would have seen my mom, the real mom, because I wish that, but she couldn't never change it. There's a major disorder.
Right.
But, you know, at the same time, sometimes I wish people would have seen the show she puts on a little bit for strangers who don't know her.
Yeah.
And if she could have that behavior on a more regular basis, she may have had more positive outcomes overall, even if it was a masking of the negative. Right? She probably would have been happier and people would have been happier. And then that would have motivated her, you know?
Yeah.
So who knows? Yeah. As if. And as if, by the way, hot tip, it is so hard to stop doing something.
Oh,
You have to start doing something.
Okay.
So think we want to change our behavior. Well, a change means a change in direction from one thing to another.
Okay.
So it's not about just stop smoking. It's about start something else.
Yeah. Start chewing gum.
Right. Start, and that most people start about there.
Yeah.
And then change that. Right. So hot tip.
That's excellent. Real life. So I got to wondering, should hitmen be classified as serial killers?
That's a good question. Or should serial killers be considered hitmen who just put the hit out on the person by themselves?
So there's actually an author, Andy Pilquin, who wrote on his blog about that there's actually some distinctions because motivations make the real difference. Because serial killers, they're visionary or mission-oriented or hedonistic or seeking power and control. Those are their motivations. Hitmen are motivated by money.
Money.
That the serial killers are going to choose their own targets for their own reasons, and assassins are going to be whomever they're hired to kill. Serial killers require a cooling off period or tend to have a cooling off period. It may be short. It's very often quite long in between and then becomes a shorter amount of time. Hitmen don't need a cooling off period because they're not doing it for their own reasons. It's not a gratification of some kind for them other than monetarily. And so if their gratification is a lot of money, then they want as little cooling off period as possible.
Yeah, make money. Criminal Minds does a good job of like having these unsubs who are like hitmen, but also kind of a serial killer who has found their job so they can do it, and it's silly, but but they do it well.
Yeah, well, that's fun. So Gary was talking to his students about Nietzsche.
Oh yeah,
who encouraged readers to live dangerously. The secret of realizing the greatest fullness and the greatest enjoyment of existence is to live dangerously. Build your cities on the slopes of Vesuvius. Send your ships out into uncharted seas. Live in conflict with your equals and yourselves. So, Stack Exchange, just like a random user on Stack Exchange, had some very good comments on this, and that they thought that living dangerously wasn't promoting immoral or unethical behavior, but rather encouraging people to question the conventional ways of thinking, to push boundaries, to break free of mediocrity from herd mentality, to be willing to take risks that the living dangerously was an attitude of courage, autonomy, and creativity in the face of life's challenges. I was like, there you go.
Nice.
That makes sense. I appreciate that.
Yeah, that's a good commentary.
Mm-hmm. So there was a New Orleans road that is named after a musician, Alan Toussaint.
Okay.
And it really was only recently in 2022 renamed in honor of the R&B artist Alan Toussaint, who was a New Orleans native. It was part of an initiative to try and change the names of streets from Confederate figures and white supremacists. So it used to be Robert E. Lee Boulevard. In January of 2022, they renamed it Alan Toussaint. And interestingly, at the end of the movie, so we see that kind of near the beginning.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, one of his most famous pieces of music plays, and it's called Cast Your Fate to the Wind.
Okay.
And they play it. It's a instrumental at the end. You would probably recognize it, but they play it at the end of the movie. It's kind of a nice little like cap and a little honor to this New Orleans native that was influential, and I really appreciated that.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jasper, the cop who wasn't afraid to bend the rules, but only in the worst ways, was told he only has a job because of the police union. Okay. That is a whole can of worms.
Sure
And
is.
I read a whole article about it. It'll be on our social media, but it's not super relevant to what we're doing, and it's a huge, big bummer.
It's a big conversation.
It is a big
I
conversation.
mean, because we can have that conversation here in San Antonio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there is a police union in St. Louis that is worth chatting about.
Okay.
So there are a couple different St. Louis police unions. There's the St. Louis Police Officers Association. There's also the Ethical Society of Police.
Ooh.
And they have really taken a strong stance on the idea of we're going to call out when police officers do something wrong. That our job as a union is to encourage police officers to make the best right choice in the situation for the community and not only blanketly defend police officers when they are clearly wrong.
Nice.
Yeah, which I thought
Okay.
was really great. You know, that you know, we love you, but we can't support you because what you did is incorrect. Unfortunately, this group of police officers who are in the Ethical Society of Police are mostly black officers, which is great. I'm glad they have their own union. But it brings forth this kind of idea that people of color have to adhere to higher standards within their job just to get a portion of the professional respect that they deserve.
Yeah.
And that this group is the only one that's willing to say when officers do wrong, we should make sure that they are not put in positions of authority any longer.
Right.
I'm like,
I know it's hard, but good for them.
I know.
Good for them. Stay
Yes.
with it. Stay with it.
Yes.
Yes.
So hitmen probably aren't really a thing the way most people think of it. But what are the going rates?
Oh my God.
If they were a thing.
I have no idea.
It varies so widely. Slate had an article, now this is a little old, but from 2009. But basically, it could be anything. So it could be the $200,000 like the lady was offering in the jewelry. It could be $25,000. It could be less, a lot less. So one of the investigations that they did was a guy wanted to pay just $600 to have his girlfriend killed, and he thought for some reason that he could do that. Mob hits tend to be some of the least lucrative. So Richard Kuklinski, who said he'd killed more than 100 people for the mafia as a hitman in that organization, in an HBO documentary, said he got just $1,600 for every person that he killed.
Whoa.
And that often when somebody's asked to kill somebody else, they aren't paid at all within the mafia. That's just like part of your job. You're doing it as a favor for somebody else, for a higher up, in order to curry that favor. So like way less than you would think.
Horrifyingly affordable.
Horrifyingly affordable. And then lastly, Gary, as smart and creative and level-headed and a good listener that he was, his real superpower was invisibility. So there's a New York Times article by Akiko Bush talking about how to be invisible, and that what she's really talking about is how it's kind of a good thing sometimes, even not for hitmen who don't want to draw attention to themselves because they tipped too much or they talked too loud or they were too engaging and made themselves memorable. But there's a kind of a beauty to being unseen. So she talks about a book from 2012 called Quiet by Susan Cain, and she talks at length about how silent attentiveness rather than an active participation can allow one to absorb on a deep level the laws of social dynamics that go on around us. And that when you can do that in the natural world, it's maybe even more like beautiful and poignant when you can be a little more invisible, a little less noticeable. When you're out in nature, you actually get to see a lot more. She talks about this walking stick that she noticed because it moved just a little bit. So she was careful not to scare it off. So then she was able to observe it and understand it more beautifully. And she called it an inconspicuous marvel, because it was this beautiful little delicate thing that was kind of moving slowly, and that there's, some beauty and there's some specialness sometimes about things that blend in. So you have Arctic hares or Arctic foxes, and they turn white, and there's a beauty in them being unseen, or crabs that mimic the coral in which they live, or an octopus that changes its skin color to blend in around it, that it's not equivalent of being non-existent. And it's not even denying an individualism. It's sort of relishing any of the qualities that make us unique, original, or singular, and can be a sign of endurance. I just thought it was kind of interesting and pretty to think about, like being able to endure because you can blend in and be invisible.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. It was very nice.
That is interesting.
Next time, we're going to take a hiatus.
We are. Well, no, we're taking a vacay.
Yes, we are taking a vacay.
Maybe we'll remember to take some pictures and post them.
Yes.
Maybe.
We'll try.
We'll try.
But it's so hot. And it's just, we need some time off.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe we can, because we're going to be driving. Maybe we can do a little go live.
Ooh, that'd be fun.
And say hi to everybody.
That'd be fun.
From the road.
Yes, absolutely. That'd be great. So don't worry. We have plenty of outtake content for you.
Oh my God. Don't we? I feel, Chris, round of applause. Because Christy's going to go through all of that bonus content. There's a lot we talk.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
When our show is an hour long, that's because our recording was well over an hour and a half
so
usually.
we've got content. It's all going to be new episodes.
That's right. It's all going to be new. It'll still come out on the regular schedule. It'll be there for you. But we will be back with more fresh episodes soon. Brand new things that we're going to talk about. Who knows even what they're going to be yet. But that doesn't mean there's not going to be lots of fun stuff for you to listen to in the meantime. And we really appreciate that you listen. We don't just come on the radio. We really appreciate that you take the time to download our show and listen. Hey, tell a friend.
Yes.
Rate and review.
Oh, please.
because
Yes.
it does help us get found.
Algorithms. You know how this works.
Yeah.
Algorithms.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah.
Like
So
our stuff on social media
please
so that you
share
can
it.
see our stuff on social media and share it. Because the more people see it, the bigger our show can grow, the more we can provide additional content for you. We really appreciate it. Anyway,
Yes.
go do that.
go do that. And while you're at it, go check out Town and Country
Oh, yes.
and Vogue.
That's right.
And Cosmo. Thank y'all. We shout you out because you have continued to put us on your list.
That's right.
Of like shows people need to see and to hear.
Yes.
We don't really do the C portion. I don't
No.
know. Maybe one day. You could change.org. I don't know.
Yeah.
Send us a petition. But we're really appreciative that somebody out there was listening and put us up with some amazing other podcasts that we really respect. So that's why it's important to share, because
That's
they're
right.
getting the attention and saying, oh, look here. And you do that, your friends get to know it. And then we get to keep doing this, and then we all have more fun.
That's right. And it's more fun when you can listen with a friend. Until next time, be safe, be kind, and wash your hands.
Da, da, da.